The laughter was the worst part. It wasn't just a chuckle. It was a cascade of condescending academic scorn that echoed off the sterile walls of the Grant Committee boardroom. Dr. Alistair Croft, my mentor, the titan of modern genetics, whose name was practically scripture in our field, stood before them, a PowerPoint slide of my research proposal glowing behind him. He pointed a laser at my name. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, a cruel smirk playing on his lips, "this is what happens when promising science devolves into mystical nonsense. Dr. Eris Thorne believes our flora is trying to talk to us." The room erupted. I felt the heat rise in my face, a burning shame so intense it felt like my skin was peeling away. I was 28 years old, his star protege, and he was publicly executing my career. He called my theory of botanical acoustics, the idea that plants emit measurable communicative sound waves in response to their environment, a flight of fancy, a professional embarrassment, and the final nail in the coffin, career suicide. I was dismissed from the lab that same afternoon. Security escorted me out as my former colleagues averted their eyes, some still smirking. They didn't just fire me, they excommunicated me. They tried to erase me. But you can't erase a truth just because you refuse to listen to it. They called me a lunatic, but I knew deep in my bones what they couldn't accept. The forest was screaming, and I was the only one who could hear it. That painful departure was a death and a rebirth. I walked away from everything, my apartment, my savings, my reputation. I sold my car and bought a beat-up cargo van, cramming it not with furniture, but with oscilloscopes, parabolic microphones, and hydrophones I'd built myself. That van became my home, my lab, my sanctuary. I drove until the noise of the city and the echoes of their laughter faded, and all I could hear was the wind. I became a ghost, haunting the forgotten, barren places of the world, the edges of deserts, the scars of wildfires, the toxic plains left behind by industry. The pursuit was relentless, almost a madness. I'd spend weeks in a single location, setting up a delicate web of sensors. My life governed by the rising and setting of the sun. I'd sit for days, headphones pressed to my ears, listening to nothing. Just static, the whisper of the wind, the scuttling of insects. The mockery followed me, a phantom in the silence. The plant whisperer, one online journal had snidely called me. Dr. Doolittle of the daisies. There were nights, huddled in that cold van with rain lashing against the windows, where their voices became my own. Was I crazy? Was I chasing a ghost? A sound that only existed in my own desperate mind? I was utterly alone, armed with nothing but a theory everyone I respected had declared a joke. But then, I'd remember the feeling in that boardroom, that absolute chilling certainty that they were wrong. And I would go back out into the mud and the dark, and I would listen again. The breakthrough came in a patch of cracked, desolate earth in what was once farmland, poisoned by salt and neglect. For 3 weeks, I'd recorded nothing but a profound, low-frequency hum, a monotonous, mournful sound I started calling the death rattle. It was the sound of utter desolation. On a desperate whim, I drove 100 miles to a thriving, ancient forest. I recorded the sounds there, a complex, vibrant symphony of high-frequency clicks, deep, resonant thrums, and pulsing rhythms. It was the sound of life, of water moving from root to leaf, of a community flourishing. I called it the Symphony of Growth. Back in that dead field, I set up emitters. I didn't add water, I didn't add nutrients. I just played the sound, the bioacoustic signature of a healthy ecosystem. For days, nothing happened. I was at the end of my rope, my funding gone, my hope a dying ember. And then, on the 7th morning, I saw it. a single impossible green shoot pushing its way through the cracked saline earth. It was listening. The soil itself seemed to be changing, restructuring. The latent seeds, dormant for years, were responding to the vibration, the invitation to grow. That single shoot became a patch of green. That patch became a field. I had discovered it. You could coax life back from the dead, not with chemicals or brute force, but with a song. You just had to play the right one. Years passed. My work moved from a dead field to entire valleys. I wasn't just a researcher anymore. I was a reclaimer of wastelands. My company, BioHarmonia, was sought out by governments and conservation groups around the world. We were turning deserts into grasslands, toxic soil into thriving wetlands, all by reintroducing the acoustic signatures of life. The mystical nonsense was now a revolutionary, multi-billion-dollar field, bioacoustic ecological science, a field I had created. And that's how I found myself standing on the main stage at the Global Symposium for Environmental Innovation. The keynote speaker. The venue? The very same university that housed the lab that had thrown me out like garbage. And sitting there in the front row, looking small and gray and utterly obsolete, was Dr. Alistair Croft. I never mentioned his name. I didn't have to. I simply began my presentation. On the massive screen behind me, a photo appeared. The saline poison field I had first worked in, a picture of cracked, brown death. I let the image hang in the air, a testament to hopelessness. Then I played the sound I had recorded there. The hall filled with that low, mournful, grating hum, the death rattle. The audience shifted uncomfortably. It was the sound of oblivion. This, I said, my voice calm and clear, is the sound of a world giving up. I clicked to the next slide. The screen exploded with color. It was the same field 5 years later. A lush green pasture dotted with wildflowers, teeming with birds and insects. A collective gasp went through the auditorium. And this, I said as I hit the next button, is the sound of a world being invited to live again. The hall filled with the symphony, the vibrant, complex, beautiful music of the thriving forest. It was more than sound. It was life itself made audible. It was undeniable. It was a miracle. And in that moment, I looked directly at Dr. Croft. There was no triumph on his face, no anger, just a profound, hollow emptiness. The look of a man who had been standing on the shore, smugly insisting the world was flat, while my ship sailed over the horizon and discovered a new continent. He hadn't just been wrong. He had been irrelevant. His laughter in that boardroom hadn't silenced me. It had become the silence that now defined his own legacy. The standing ovation was thunderous, but I barely heard it. I was looking at the faces in the crowd, young students, eager researchers. Their eyes wide with wonder. They weren't laughing. They were listening. And I realized the poetic justice wasn't in Croft's humiliation. It was in his replacement. The real victory wasn't proving my old mentor wrong. It was in creating a future where a new generation of scientists would start their work from a place of listening. They tried to silence a single voice, but in the end, all they did was amplify a symphony for the entire world to hear.